Good morning. Welcome to this toolbox training session where I'm going to take you through the main points of the SLX Sectional Door. But it's a bit more than that. This is a new product, a new panel set, SLX, and I think you'll think it's a fair addition to our bling products. It's a cracking looking door, this. And by the time we put it in, the sun will be going down, we'll get some backlit in it, and it'll look fantastic. Stay with us. Cheers. Okay, so we're going to get started now. We're going to open this frame pack. But before we start, I want to introduce you to somebody. This, everybody, is our Managing Director, Steve Hilton. Say good morning, Steve.
Good morning.
Excellent, let's get going then. Okay, so we prefer to use scissors because we find we get less big long scratches on our panels. So we'll just remove the shrink wrap, nice and easy. So that's all the shrink wrap off. Just tie up, open the box up, and you'll see we end up with everything we need in the door, nicely stacked. Okay, so we've got the frame open, and you can see we've got a well-packaged set of equipment. I'm going to talk you through the main items. The first and the most important item in here is this. It's the fitting instructions. Now I know you've probably fitted a lot of sectional doors, but there's some odd bits and pieces that you need to understand. And if we do make product updates, then it'll tell you in here. It will also tell you how to install the door safely. So please follow the health and safety information, use the right tools, and make sure that you have got the relevant experience for fitting a product like this. So what else have we got here? So see if we can just move this here and lift this on top and set it down. This is the frame leg. You can see this one's flat and it's for back fixing. The holes are here in the frame. Here we've got the horizontal track that will run back into the garage, and packed in here are the springs that you'll need. We've got the curves that were packed nicely between the tracks, and you can see everything is protected nicely with these polystyrene blocks. Here we've got our hanging brackets, our spacer bar extension pieces, and our cables. Now at either end there's a box, and inside each box there's all the hardware. So pulleys, spring spacers, intermediate roller brackets, fixings. This little bag is particularly important. Look out for it. It's the one that's got the T20 fixings. Everything in there is pretty unique. Torque fixings for the panels, frame brackets, intermediate hinges, and at the other end, see you've got the main fixings. So those are your 13mm fixings for into the wall and into the floor. You can see we've got rollers and intermediate roller brackets and all the bits and pieces that you'll need to install the door, which we'll talk you through when we actually work through the door. But you can see these are the main components, nicely packed, and it's all pretty logical. Okay, let's get on with assembling the frame. So here we are, and we're going to attach the header to the frame leg, and I'm going to show you all the components that you need. So here's our frame leg, here's our header. You'll also remember when we opened the frame pack, I mentioned a small bag with some unique fixings in it. We'll keep hold of this bag because the stuff in it's important. And the first item we need are the 7mm Teck screws. Now, the Teck screws go into the frame here. I've started these two off. Now you can see there's two banks of 3 fixings, holes. And what are they for? Well, we also call this head, we also call it the blender. and it allows you to blend the door into the building. So if the lintel's slightly up or down, we pre-drilled some holes that allow you to just move the header or the blender up and down and blend it into the building. So the 7mm screws just fix in like that, and then they're just tightened up by using the wrench. You can see how good the frame packaging is. You open the box well and nicely to help protect the frame and the finish in the frame. So you can see that goes together really nicely. And then all you would do is move to the other end of the header and attach this frame leg. Now what we've also got is we've got the frame brackets. And for you old timers out there like myself, you'll remember once upon a time we used to use 13mm nuts and bolts in these, and it was a real faff, especially on a cold frosty day. But how good are these? Slot it into the hole, twist it round, and there's your frame bracket fixed. No more than 13mm nuts and bolts. And there's 5 of these on this door. There you go. You can see there's how it sits on the other side, one I did earlier. And the final thing that we'll need for fitting the frame into the opening, the goalposts onto the building, because this is the bit that allows us to attach our garage door to your building, is these 13mm fixings. Now you can see we also provide roll plugs. Of course there's many other brands out there. These are for medium density block work, concrete. They wouldn't be suitable for something like lightweight blocks, the thermoblock, etc. And obviously they'll be no good for fixing to steel. So for all we've provided a good set of fixings here, they won't cover every application, and you need to think about that, how you are attaching all of these items to the building, because these are carrying the load of the door. So there we go. So I'll carry on with the rest of this, and I'll catch you in a minute or two when we lift the frame into the opening. Okay, so we've got our frame temporarily fitted here just now. So we'll make sure that all of our levels are correct. We've got to make sure that we're correct in the vertical. We're also plumb in this direction as well. We don't want the tracks kicking out from bottom. Yeah, we're nice and level there. And of course, very importantly, the head. All good. We'll do the same on this leg as well. So you want everything to be nicely plumb. This pit's fitted correctly, the door will go in correctly, the door will work beautifully. Thanks. Okay, so we're just going to put the pilot hole in the old frame here. You can see why they used to build ships out of this stuff. And then we've got 13mm anchor fixing. And just be careful and hope that you don't over tighten it. It'll snap the head off. Okay, we'll go across the other side, we'll do it there as well. Okay, so earlier on I showed you the frame bracket fitting inside the frame leg. Well, in this installation it actually suits us to fix the bracket on the outside of the frame leg. See here, I've already got my pilot hole in there. Just line it up. There you go, simple. Another way of fixing a frame bracket. Okay, so we're now going to connect the horizontal track to the vertical frame leg. And Teckentrup, as you know, we're a little bit innovative, and we've designed this so that you can actually fit the horizontal track like this. Connect your spacer bar at the back, put your other track in. You can then actually load the springs into the spring trays, then lift everything up, prop it, and then you can get everything level and square, check your diagonals, etc. And the way you do that is that there's a location pin here, locates into the frame leg just here, and then this half moon slot here with the T20 fixing in it allows the frame to rotate up to 90 degrees. So I'm just going to pop the rotating pin in, nice and simple, just goes there like that. So there we are, and you can see our slot. I'm just going to fix the T20 fixing. There you go, that's the first connection. This hole here, when we lift it vertical, the second T20 fixing goes into it. And that'll just rotate nicely up. Okay, so now we're at the spacer bar. And the spacer bar, as it says in the tin, spaces the horizontal tracks, keeps everything parallel. The spacer bar, if you were to sit it on top of the panels, it's the same length as the panels. But to get it to being the right length, we've got the small extension pieces to fit into the end of the spacer bar, locating in the punch hole, and where a 13mm track nut and bolt pulls it all together. We also have the extension piece which slides in here and then allows us to extend and clamp onto the spacer bar, allowing us to pick up the side wall, or indeed, as we're going to do, interconnect the doors and create a rather nice and neat installation. So I'll push on now. Okay, so now we're going to locate the shreave wheel at the top of the frame leg. And of course, you'll all know that as the cables come out of the spring trays, they run over the top of the shreave wheel, run down the frame, and hook up onto the bottom panel, and that's what allows the door to lift. We also have this small pulley on the other side, and that sits on the outside because of course we anchor the cables to the outside of the frame. And so it all fits nice and snugly. We've got a third part, which is the spacer. And I get told that this is quite a tricky thing to do, but I've been doing this for a while now, and I find if you just locate everything in like that, it will stay in its place. And all you have to do is get your axle, pick up holes, feed it all the way through, pick split pin, nice and easy, just slots in like that. Shreave wheel installed. This fixing in the foot of the frame leg is quite often missed out, but it's really important because what you'll find is over time the frame will start to twist and it will open out, and then you can have things like the end cap starting to show, or even the bottom rollers can fall out. So it's really important that we fix this in the floor. Very simple, please don't forget it. So now you can see that we've got our horizontal tracks up, and we've got them propped temporarily in position just now. And in doing this, this has allowed us to check the dimension from here, the far corner, which is the diagonal, and from that diagonal to that one, and making sure they're exactly the same. Those are the dimensions that will tell you if you have got your tracks in the right position. If it's not the same figure, then there is something that is wrong. What we'll then do is, we will then put a strap here to pick up the extending bar here. And what we'll then do is, as you can see there's another door going to go in here, we'll pick up the horizontal track on the same extension bar, and we've got a really neat installation method at this point here. Obviously we'll trim down the brackets, etc. So that's how we're going to finish off here. We then have to put our horizontal track, our curve in, our horizontal connection from the horizontal to the vertical. This is going to go here. And the final part that we mustn't forget is the T20 fixing. Remember we put the one in earlier on in the half moon that allowed us to lift it up? Well, this one here allows us to lock it off, and that's nice and simply put in up there. So when we're complete here, we're going to have our tracks level. You can see here with the level, the spirit level. We've checked our diagonals, they're the same. So we're going to have tracks that are going to be running perfectly for the door. And if you remember earlier on, it's crucial about getting these in correctly as well. So what we've got now is the perfect track system to allow the panels to open. And that's what we're going to move on to in a minute to do the panels. Okay, this is fantastic. We've got everything installed now, everything's level as we discussed before. Just remind you again, diagonals, really important. We've double checked those, we're very happy with them. Now you'll notice we've got one track suspension here. The reason we only need one track suspension is that we have tied the spacer bar through the spacer bar extensions onto the fabric of the building. And you can see on this side here, we've extended out here. And as I mentioned to you earlier on, we're going to pick up the next door by using this extension piece here. So that's tying everything back to the building. If we hadn't been using these extension pieces, we would have needed to put a secondary track suspension here. So that would have been one here and one here. This is the 2750 track length, all outlined in the price list and in the fitting instructions. So that's why we're only needing the one suspension here. You older guys, like myself, will remember that we used to have to put a fixing here at the front curve. That's no longer required with the 2.0 frame pack, which this is. Done away with the polycarbonate extension piece at the front. So a lot easier to install now. Just the one fixing if you're tying into the fabric of the building. Excellent. Okay, I'm going to kill two birds with one stone here. Cast your mind back. Do you remember when we were fixing the horizontal track to the vertical frame leg? We located this pin in the hole at the top and we put the T20 fixing in here. And then the track was sitting at 45 degrees onto the floor. Well, there's a reason for that as well, and it allows you a second way of assembling the door. Because you can actually put the springs in at that point, load everything up, and then lift the tracks up to the point that we've actually got to just now, where the tracks are sitting horizontal and we're about to start fixing the springs in up there, because I know that's the way most people do it. But this is another way, and in showing you down here, you'll see what we're going to do up there in a minute as well. And I want to talk you through all the parts, because this is really pretty simple. So we've got a pulley, we've got two pulleys actually, we've got springs, we have got a spring anchor, and we've got spring spacers, and we've got our cable, and we've got what we all call the cheesies. So let's talk about the cable. The cable comes with a label on it. We would like it if you left the label on the cable. The reason is, in the future, if anybody has to service the door and they want to know what cables they are, that tells them exactly what cable it is. This door has an S3 cable, and we understand what that is. If I come to the springs, you'll see they've got a colour on the end of them. This is a green spring, a GS5 we call it. So again, if somebody identifies a spring by the colour on the end of it, we know exactly what spring they've got. So how does all of this go together? Well, there's quite a lot of logic to it actually. Let's start at this end. Pass our cables onto the pulley. Now if you see there, they're all flopping around. No good. So there's a solution to that, and that's what the cheesies are for. Because if you look at them, they're curved. And they just sit in there like that. Little tap in. That side, flick it over. second cheese in, and now your cables don't jump in the pulley. Dead simple. There's another reason though, and if you can see, the actual edge of the cheesies is sitting proud. That means when the pulley's sitting in the tray, this is keeping the metal body of the pulley off the tray, and it's gliding along the tray. So it keeps everything nice and quiet. So let's assemble the springs onto the tray. The anchor, and we always put the curly part of the spring upwards. There we go. I can pass that down to you. And there's a slot in the end of the track. The anchor comes through and out the other end. And Steve will pop that little anchor onto the end, and that holds the spring securely. What we then have is the spring spacers, and I'm going to position these along the spring. You notice the spring tapers. It's really important that we put the spacer within 10 millimeters of the end. That's perfect of the taper, where the taper finishes. This would be no good down here. Why is it no good down there? Well, what happens is when the springs go in tension, they snake. And what will happen is the head of the spring will point downwards and they'll start dragging along the tray, making a lot of noise. So you really want it within 10 millimeters of the front. And it just sits down there. See if you can put one down at the bottom, near the back. And the other ones, well, just about the length of the spring up. Okay, and then we got a pulley, and we just need to think about this. There's the piece that connects to the bottom hookup bracket, and that runs down the inside. So you want the pulley to come in with these anchors on the outside, which pick up the holes on the frame leg. So you just pop that in there like that. Put it back, and you're now going to pick up the springs here. Okay, so that's everything in there. And what you probably do at this point is you just get some light oil, GT85 or something, just give it a light coating, never grease, nothing like that. And then I'll just reach here and pull the tray cover. And the tray cover easily locates, find the leading edge, pop it in, and then feed it backwards into the housing like that. And just work it forwards. That's all on. And then the final piece that I put onto it, well, I've left them over here, is the twist locks. That just holds everything in place. Now what I'd ask you to remember is that the energy in these springs is quite considerable. You think of the way we're protecting those springs. You think about the people that might be in a garage, children. You think where the safest place is for the springs in the garage. I think the safest place is on top of the horizontal tracks, in nice solid metal boxes, clipped at the end, twist locked in place, So if anything does fail, it's completely enclosed. That, I think, is the safest spring mechanism in the garage door industry. And now, we're ready to install it, like we did earlier on. So we go to the door, Steve would have his end down on the floor, we'd connect it up 45 degrees, and then we go through the whole process again of lifting it up, strapping it in place, and then we just connect the cables up. So that's a different way of doing it that we don't tend to do, though it is actually what's in the fitting instructions. So I'll go ahead now and do it the way that we all do it in the UK, which is now climb up steps and do everything at high level. Okay, see you in a few minutes. Okay guys, so what I'm going to show you now is the second way of putting the springs, the cables and the spacers into the tray. The benefit of this is that it's easier to install the trays with less weight in them, and this is how some of our fitters do it. And I wanted to show everybody Jim's method of installing the cables, because it all gets quite complicated with these, so that it's nice and easy. The trick is breaking everything down into steps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the springs in, I'll then put the clips onto the springs, then we'll go to the front of the tray and we'll install the pulley with the cable. Okay, so let's get started. So here we are with the springs with the back end clip on there, and you can see we're going to install these springs into the tray and the hooks are going to be up the way, okay? And that's it, it's that simple. We then pass the bracket back through the slot here, and then we get what is euphemistically called the wood-shaped bracket. I'll let you work that one out yourself. Just pop it in there like that, and that then secures the springs in the tray. We then have the clips, the spring clips, and there's 4 of these, and effectively what we're going to do is place them up the spring equidistant, and you can see one side's open and one side's closed. You just rotate them one after the other, okay? It's dead simple. We just pop them in underneath the spring, equidistant like that. Nice and easy. Like I say, rotating them backwards and forwards. And then we get to the front one. Okay, so why did I want to show you the front clip? Well, it's quite important because these clips are what's allowing the springs to glide as they stretch, which makes the door nice and quiet. Now, if we don't position this one correctly, what can happen is when the spring is under tension, it can bend down and this part of the spring here can drag on the spring tray. So what we do is we position it no more than 10 millimeters away, which is about 3 coils on the spring from where the spring starts to taper. Dead simple, and then you just sit it under the other one and pop it in. But that's one of the key clips, okay? And that'll make your door nice and quiet. So we've got our springs in, and what we're now going to do is we're going to go to the front of the tray and we're going to fit the pulleys and cables, which is the bit that sort of confuses most people. Here we go. Okay, so here we are with the pulley and the cables, and you can see this all can get quite messy. Now what I've already done is I've got my pulley and I've put these wedges by tapping them into the pulley as we did earlier on in the other method, and these wedges stop the cables coming out of the pulley, so you don't need to worry about the pulley. At this point as well, upside down makes no difference, it's not handed. These wedges perform another job. Again, you'll see that they are nylon basically, and these sit in the tray and again glide along the tray, so they're really, really important, okay? Now let's think about how the pulley works with the leg. What we have here is we've got a set of panels, and the panels will have a hook up in the bottom, and the cable hooks up onto the bottom of the panels, runs up through the shreave wheel, connects onto this pulley, runs round and is anchored on the outside of the frame. And the springs are the counterbalance to the weight of the panels. So we've got to make sure all of this is the right way round. So the hook up is on the inside of the frame leg, okay? So all we're going to do now is we're going to pass the hook up over the shreave wheel on that side of it, holding everything in this orientation, and then we'll worry about straightening the cables afterwards, okay? So here we go. Okay. Now because we've got the cables nice and short, we can actually see cables are coming out of here in the right position because the cable's short. And all we have to then do is look after underneath the shreave wheel, and you can see it's twisted there. Turn it round. These are now not twisted, and if we just hold them there like that, it's nice and easy. And using this nut and bolt that's provided in the fitting instructions, simply pass this into here, and with a temporary fixing, that goes on like that. Now you'll notice I'm not getting hot and bothered if cables are popping up anywhere. I know that as long as I put that on the right place, I know as long as that's not been twisted when I push it into here, as long as these 2 points don't turn round, the thing can't be twisted. So all we now have to do is worry about this one later on, because this side will be sorted. And all we have to do then is push our pulley all the way back to meet up with the springs, and we'll connect the springs and the pulley together, and then we come back and we worry about these two. But you can see these are now short, so that's not going to be a difficult job. And this is how we manage the cables, nice and easily, no dramas. Okay, so we've passed our pulley back, we've met up with the springs, and now we're going to hook them up. Dead straightforward. We'll start on the further away one, lifting it out, make sure the hook's upwards. We get our pulley, and we just simply hook it in like that, making sure we don't twist this round, because remember, as long as we won't twist that round, then the inside cable's not going to be twisted. Hook's down here, so we just turn it round, lift the bracket out, and hook it in, okay? Pop everything back in. We're not worrying about cables twisting, we're just wanting everything back in the way we had it. And the last thing I do again is, remember we talked about this bracket, this clip, just before we go away from it, make sure it's not moved while we've been hooking up. Mine had. Get it back to that 10mm away, just one last little look down, nothing else is moved. Great, that's the springs hooked up to the pulley. Nice and easy. Inside cables are fine. We've just got to worry about these outside cables, which are now actually short at the front, okay? So let's go back to the front and hook them up to the anchor points in the frame. Okay guys, so we've got our inbound cable that's going to hook up to the bottom of the panel in the right place. So what we now need to do is get our outbound cable, which is outside the frame leg, which is going to hook up and take the tension of the door. And that, easy way to do it is to go back to the pulley, get our cable, there it is there, the outbound side, and we just want to make sure that it's not wrapped around the inbound cables, okay? So just have a little check in there and you can see it's not. Now it could be twisted this, but my advice is ignore that just now, and we'll come back to that in a second, okay? It's all about stages. So we just want to pass this cable down the inside, down the back of the pulley. Here it comes, there we go. And keep it on the outbound side of the cable. Okay, so that's going to be running down the back there and running down the back. Okay, now it's got a little home it needs to go into, and I need you to just come in a little bit close so I can show you exactly where it goes. So here we are, we're just about to untwist the cables and get everything nice and easy, but there's a route that the cables have to go. Now this is the second method. In the first method, when the tracks are coming down at 45 degrees onto the ground, this gap is opened up. With the tracks already up and at 90 degrees and running horizontally, this gap can be quite tight. But basically what we need is we need two of these cables behind here, and it's the inbound cables we're looking to do. So what I would do is, I just pull those out of the way, I get hold of these two here. Now
can see I'm having a little bit of trouble getting it in there. You might have to ease that with a screwdriver, just ease it ever so slightly. And then pull it all down. Put some tension onto everything so that your inbound cables are sitting on top of the shreave wheel. And remember, they can't be twisted up because we've set this up earlier on so that nothing will twist. And that we just, again, make sure our cables are running down the back. Okay, so there we go, they're running down the back. Now we could have a twist in these cables, and that's what we're going to do now. We're just going to double check and remove that twist from the cable. And we mainly want to do this by keeping a little bit of tension in everything, and then it will nicely come together, okay? Okay, so we've now got all of our cables routing in the right order. So we just want to go through it and make sure that nothing's twisted. Dead simple. All I do is, as ever, is go back to the pulley, look for a twist, and there we have one. Here, you can see it moving up the cables. If you put your thumb in there and just guide that twist all the way to the front, and then lay it over the top of the pulley, and then pull your twist down through the back, and actually pull it all the way through. Then the twist will come down into these cables here, and you can straighten out to the bottom. You can see there, holding that little bit of tension and everything, just kind of checking. Pulled it all the way down, and we now have our two cables there. And we can now get our bracket, our hook that's going to hook onto the frame here, and the cables. We'll just take the one that's on the inside and hook it up there. Other to the other side like that. Those Christmas cracker things. Again, just making sure the cable's running down the back nicely, and then lift the hook up into the frame leg, like so. And the final check on everything up, everything's routing in the right place. Cables in the top nicely, go all the way down. No twist there. This is also sitting on top of the shreave wheel and the grooves. So we now know that everything's installed, routed in the right place, and not twisted. It's really easy because we just broke it down into stages and didn't fight with one great big cable and try and get everything done at the end. So I hope you found that useful. Now I'm going to go ahead here now and put the tray lids on. I'm going to put the twist brackets on. But that's how you put your cables and your springs in nice and easily when you've got your spring trays already installed and levelled up and square and everything. Thanks very much.
Okay, so you can see we've got our first panel in, the bottom panel. And we've installed the bottom brackets. These also get called the hookup bracket because this is the bracket where our cable will come down and connect up and lift all the panels. You'll notice it's running flush with the bottom profile here, which is carrying the EDPM seal in the bottom. You'll notice we've got a fixing in all of the holes provided. Please do that. This is where all the energy from the spring mechanism, the counterbalance, connects to the door, so there's a lot of power going through this bracket. So that's the bottom bracket. I want to show you an intermediate bracket. And you know, with the Teckentrup door, we have got our anti-finger pinch here, and then we've got the semicircular cutout curve in the back where the barrel line of our hinges sits. Now, this is quite important because usually there's a team of 2 people fitting these. The fitting instructions tell us what to do, but if we just adopt slightly different procedures, you can end up with a fairly unsatisfactory outcome. So if you can think about this, if there's a 5-meter door, you would have 3 center hinges and 2 intermediates on the outside. So that's 5 hinges. The goal that you really want to happen is that if you put a laser through all the barrels, the laser would just connect them all up perfectly. But what happens is that some people will put the hinge in and they'll sit it in the bottom of this little curve, and some people will sit it in the top, some people will try to position it naturally. What you really always want to do is you want to put the hinge into the curve and then pull it upwards. And if everybody keeps the hinge up, it means all the barrels are lining up. So you have it on the outside, pulling up, and then we'll put our fixings in the piloted holes, but always upwards. Okay, that will remove things like squeaky hinges and creaks and stuff. Certainly eliminate a lot of them. That's a good tip. Funny little red thing. If I had £1 for every time somebody told me we just throw them away, I'd be a very rich man. Don't throw them away. This is what they're for. Bottom panel, second panel. Ease the panel up, slide a little red spacer in, and it creates the gap between the bottom panel and the second panel. And then when you get to this one and the top one, and it creates a nice even gap. Do you remember we talked about getting the barrels of the hinges in the same place? Pointless doing all of that if we then have one person putting the panel higher at one end or lower, and we get a load of binding and crackling and horrible noises. So if we all use the spacers, we get this lovely continuity through the stack up of the door. Little red spacer, we never throw them away. Okay, so here we have an intermediate hinge that takes the roller. You can see here that this is a cam, so it's off center. Here is the Allen key and the lock. And how this works is, you put the Allen key in here, push it down, and it rotates the cam. Now why is that good and why do we need it? Well, if you look here, when we first put that intermediate hinge onto the panel, you can see it's sitting off the seal of the frame. And we need that to just be touching. If we started loading the next panels now on top of this one and then the next one, that gap gets bigger as you go up. And eventually you'll have a panel just shooting down the front, and that's really not what we want to be happening. So to close it up, all we do is put our Allen key in, just push down and you'll see the gap close. And all we want to do is just have it touching. We don't want to ram it in, just gently touching. Now if it's too tight, what you'll see is when we do start lifting the door, is it will literally take shavings off the inside of the seal. If that happens, just back it off ever so slightly, and that's it. Yeah, none of this tightening and loosening 11mm nuts and bolts and cold frosty days. How easy is that? Nice and neat as well. What a great system. Okay, so here we are at the top of the door now, and just a little bit on the top roller bracket. So it's a two-piece device. This plate connects us to the door, and then this part holds the roller. Now, you know that there's two setups for the door. One is with an electric motor and one is manual. So in a manual door, what you actually want is the top panel not just to be able to flop back inwards. So you set the top roller far forwards and down, and you'll actually feel in the front of the curve it's a small vertical step in the curve. So you actually want, when the top panel's closed in there, down into that vertical piece and then tightened up. Now that means that you can't then just pull the panel back, you've actually got to lift the door. So that's no good if you're setting an electric motor, because an electric motor moves linearly. It moves straight back, and as the door moves straight back, the panel's got to follow it, or else all that will happen is the top of the panel goes. So we have to set the top roller in a slightly different position. Now, if you set the roller away back here, which you could do, the problem is though, that you're making the panel effectively twice as thick. It's almost 80mm thick. And then when the door comes up and transitions through this curve, it'll probably smack into the spring tray. So that's not a good thing to do. Another little tip is, if you actually have it so that it's running and pushing down on the top of the track rather than the bottom of the track,
And as the door goes into that final close position, you'll actually get compression by the roller pushing down onto the bottom floor. You can't overdo that, but we'll just allow it just to give that little bit of assistance. So me, I like to get the top roller so that the axle's sitting just inside the top panel, and then I just make sure it's closing and then just tighten those nuts up there like that. When the motor closes that will give a nice compression and get us going sitting down nicely. Okay, excellent. Let's get it complete and think about the motor. So there we go, we've got our Kartech SLX Vision garage door installed, and you can see here I've now installed the Kartech drive as well, and there's other videos online showing that. But I just wanted to show you how we try and make everything as easy as possible for you. If you look at the spacer bar here, you can see it's been punched, and we've got this bracketry here that allows you to hang the motor onto the spacer bar. Now this is suitable for doors up to 3 meters without any additional support. Above that, we would say that you probably need to have some extra support holding the spacer bar. But you can see that's really neat and gives you a lovely installation where it's neat and tidy in your garage. All good from Kartech.